Welcome back friends. Welcome back to another video session from this channel. So in this video session we are going to study about the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, right? In the previous video sessions we have studied about the initiation phase, elongation phase and the termination phase of the translation mechanism which occurs in case of the prokaryotes. And in this video session we are going to learn about the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, right? So let me write it here. Initiation phase, right? Initiation phase of translation in case of eukaryotes, right? Eukaryotes. So here we need to understand one key point here. Though the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which occurs in case of eukaryotes, though it is very similar to the translation mechanism or the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which occurs in case of the prokaryotes, but here still the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which occurs in case of the eukaryotes, it gets varied from the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which occurs in case of the prokaryotes under two different aspects here. So what are the two different aspects here? The two different aspects include usage of the various factors and the other one is formation of 43S pre-initiation complex, right? So let me write it here. So what are those? Usage of various initiation factors, and the other one is formation of 43S pre-initiation complex. Formation of 43S pre-initiation complex. 43S pre-initiation complex, right? Pre-initiation complex, right? So here at first we should have a basic idea regarding the usage of the various initiation factors. So if we recall the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which took place in case of the prokaryotes, in order to organize the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of the prokaryotes, the translation mechanism or the translation process, it took the advantage of only three different initiation factors, right? So what are the three different initiation factors? These include initiation factor 1, initiation factor 2 and initiation factor 3. But here, in order to organize the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, the specific translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of around 10 initiation factors, right? So what are the 10 initiation factors here? The 10 initiation factors include, the very first one is eukaryotic initiation factor 1A and the other one is eukaryotic initiation factor 2 and the other one is eukaryotic initiation factor 2B and the other one is eukaryotic initiation factor 5B, eukaryotic initiation factor 3, eukaryotic initiation factor 4F, eukaryotic initiation factor 4A, eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, eukaryotic initiation factor 4G and the other one is eukaryotic initiation factor 4B. So by taking the advantage of around 10 initiation factors, the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, it is carried out, right? So right now we are not going to discuss about the activity of individual initiation factors here. So once when the mechanism of the initiation phase of the translation mechanism, when it is in progress, surely I will explain you the activity of individual initiation factors. But right now we are going to discuss about formation of 43S pre-initiation complex. Here now my question is, what is 43S pre-initiation complex? Are you able to understand what is 43S pre-initiation complex? Pre-initiation complex here, right? 43S pre-initiation complex. So before studying about the formation of 43S pre-initiation complex, at first we should have a basic idea regarding the structural physiology of the small subunit of the eukaryotic ribosome. So here, in case of eukaryotes, the small subunit of the eukaryotic ribosome, it is nothing but what? 40S, right? In case of prokaryotes, it is 30S, and whereas in case of eukaryotes, it is 40S. What it is? 40S subunit of the ribosome. 40S subunit of the ribosome, right? 40th subunit of ribosome. If we recall the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which was took place in case of prokaryotes for the recruitment of the initiated tRNA to the P site of the ribosome, for the recruitment of the initiated tRNA to the P site of the ribosome, the initiation phase of the translation mechanism which was took place in case of the prokaryotes, it did not take the advantage of any specific initiation factor, right? For the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid to the P site of the ribosome, the initiation phase of the translation in case of prokaryotes, it did not take the advantage of any specific initiation factor. But here in case of eukaryotes, for the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA, so let me write it here. For the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA to the P site of the ribosome, right? To the P site of the ribosome. For the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA to the P site of the ribosome, the specific translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of a specific factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 2. By taking the advantage of eukaryotic initiation factor 2, the initiated tRNA, it gets successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome, right? So this is nothing but A site, P site and E site, right? For the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA, eukaryotic initiation factor 2 is required. But the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it remains in active conformation only when it is in association with what? GTP. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in addition with GTP and the initiated tRNA, right? It is together known as what? Ternary complex. What it is? Ternary complex. So let me erase the things here. Ternary complex. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in addition with GTP and the initiated tRNA, it is together known as what? Ternary complex. Ternary complex. So once when the ternary complex, when it gets successfully recruited to the 40th subunit of the ribosome, under such condition, it leads to the activation of a specialized complex, and it is nothing but what? 43S pre-initiation complex. What it is? 43S pre-initiation complex. 43S pre-initiation complex. So this is the case or this is the observation which takes place only under normal conditions, right? Formation of the ternary complex, and after the successful formation of the ternary complex, now the ternary complex, it was got successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome. So once when the ternary complex, when it was got successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome, now it lead to the activation of a specialized complex, and it is nothing but what? 43S pre-initiation complex. Under normal conditions, the ternary complex formation was took place. But under abnormal condition, formation of ternary complex, it gets inhibited. So what are the various abnormal conditions here? The various abnormal conditions include which inhibit the formation of ternary complex include abnormal conditions include amino acid starvation. What it is? Amino acid starvation, hypoxia, and the other one is heat stress, and the last one is viral infection. So all these are the various strategies which inhibit the ternary complex formation, right? Now here my question is how all these abnormal strategies, they will inhibit the ternary complex formation. So the answer to this question is very simple. So if we consider the eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it possesses 3 different subunits. What are those? Alpha subunit, beta subunit and gamma subunit, right? The alpha subunit, it possesses serine amino acid, which is present at the 51 position, right? So once when the specific serine amino acid which is present at the 51 position of the alpha subunit, when it undergoes phosphorylation, what it is? Phosphorylation. when the serine amino acid which is present at the 51 position of the alpha subunit, when it undergoes phosphorylation, it will inhibit the ternary complex formation, right? So this is about the abnormal condition. Most commonly, the specific abnormal condition or the abnormal strategy, it will inhibit the ternary complex formation, and very rarely, the abnormal condition or the abnormal strategies, they will enhance the ternary complex formation, right? So here, after the successful formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex, now the specific 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit to the mRNA, right? After the successful formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex, right? So let me write it here. 43S pre-initiation complex. 43S pre-initiation complex. Pre-initiation complex formation, right? So here the specific initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid, the specific initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid, and as well as the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2 and GTP and the initiated tRNA, it gets successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome, and it lead to the formation or it lead to the activation of 43S pre-initiation complex. So here at the very beginning, eukaryotic initiation factor 2 and as well as GTP and the initiated tRNA comes into the picture. But before to that, here there is an availability of one specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 3, right? Here eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it is in association with the E site of the ribosome. So what is the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 3 here? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it is responsible, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it is responsible for associating the small subunit of the ribosome with the large subunit of the ribosome, right? So if we recall the translation mechanism, which was took place in case of the prokaryotes, the large subunit of the ribosome, it is unable to associate with the small subunit of the ribosome in the presence of initiation factor 3. So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, when it is in association with the small subunit of the ribosome, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it acts as a gatekeeper, and it will prevent the association of the large subunit of the ribosome with the small subunit of the ribosome, right? So here eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it was got successfully recruited to the E site of the ribosome. In the very next step, what exactly happens here? In the very next step, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 1A comes into the picture. Eukaryotic initiation factor 1A comes into the picture, right? Eukaryotic initiation factor 1A. Eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, it gets successfully recruited to the A site of the ribosome. So what is the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 1A? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, it will prevent the recruitment of the amino acid tRNA to the A site of the ribosome. In the presence of eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, during the initiation phase of the translation mechanism, no amino acid tRNA it is capable to recruit to the A site. The specific amino acid tRNA it is capable to recruit to the A site of the ribosome only during the elongation phase of the translation mechanism, and during the initiation phase of the translation mechanism, no amino acid tRNA it is capable to recruit to the A site of the ribosome. In order to inhibit the recruitment of the amino acid tRNA to the A site of the ribosome, the translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of a specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 1A. So after the successful recruitment of eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, now the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in association with the initiated tRNA and GTP, it comes into the picture, right? So let me present it here. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 plus GTP and initiated tRNA, which is nothing but ternary complex. And here the specific initiated tRNA, it was got successfully recruited with its encoding amino acid, to the P site of the ribosome. So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, when it has delivered the specific initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid to the P site of the ribosome, under such condition, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GTP, it undergoes GTP hydrolysis. So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, when it has undergone GTP hydrolysis, now the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it is in association with GDP. What it is? GDP. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 with GDP. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in association with GDP, it has lesser affinity. The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GDP, it has lesser affinity to recruit to the P site of the ribosome. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in association with GTP, it has higher affinity to recruit to the P site of the ribosome. After the successful recruitment of the initiated tRNA to the P site of the ribosome, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it won't remain in GTP conformation, it remains in GDP conformation. Again to reactivate the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2 in the next round of the translation mechanism, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it gets associated with a specialized initiation factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 2b. So what is eukaryotic initiation factor 2b here? It is an guanine nucleotide exchange factor. In the presence of eukaryotic initiation factor 2b, the GDP moiety, it is replaced with what? GTP moiety, right? So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, when it regains the GTP conformation, again the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it remains in active conformation, and it is capable to recruit the initiated tRNA successfully to the P site of the ribosome, right? So this is entirely a different story, right? So here, after the successful recruitment of all the specialized initiation factor, now here one more other factor it comes into the picture, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, right? What it is? Eukaryotic initiation factor 5b. The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it gets recruited to the P site of the ribosome. So let me present it here. The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it gets successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome here. So what is the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 5b here? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it is very homologous to initiation factor 2 of prokaryotic translation mechanism, right? So let me present it here. Initiation factor 2 of prokaryotic translation mechanism or the prokaryotic initiation phase. Prokaryotic initiation phase. Initiation factor, right? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it is very homologous to initiation factor 2 of the prokaryotic initiation factor, right? Or the prokaryotic initiation phase factor. Now here in the presence of eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, what exactly happens here? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it acts as a gatekeeper. In the presence of eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, the initiation factors which were got successfully recruited to their respective sites, they get successfully discarded, right? So here the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it monitors the discarding or the dissociation of the various initiation factors from their respective sites. So that is the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, right? So then in the very next step, now the specific 43S pre-initiation complex. Now the specific 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit to the eukaryotic mRNA. After the successful formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex, in the very next step, the specific 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit to the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, right? So let me present it here, right? So let us assume it as the eukaryotic mRNA, and here there is an availability of a specialized structure, and it is nothing but what? Hairpin loop structure, right? Hairpin loop structure, right? So let me present it here. Hairpin loop structure, right? So what is hairpin loop structure? How exactly the hairpin loop structure formed here? What is the reason behind the formation of hairpin loop structure, or how the hairpin loop structure is formed here? So here the specific hairpin loop structure, it is formed due to the availability of some inverted repeats, right? Due to the presence of some specific inverted repeated sequence, here the specific hairpin loop structure, it was formed. So what is the meaning of inverted repeats here? So for your better understanding of the inverted repeats, let me present it on the board, right? So let me give you one common example. Let us assume there is an availability of one specialized mRNA. So at the 5' end, at the extreme 5' end, there is an availability of some specialized nucleotides like AU, GC and C, right? And then after, there is an availability of some more other specialized nucleotides, and these include GCAG. And here at the extreme 3' end, there is an availability of specialized nucleotide which is very complementary to the specific nucleotide which is present at the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, right? For suppose if we consider the adenosine nucleotide, the complementarity of adenosine nucleotide, it is nothing but what? Uracil. And the complementarity of uracil is adenosine. The complementarity of guanosine is cytosine. The complementarity of cytosine is guanosine. And the complementarity of C is G again here. So this specialized nucleotide sequence, it is nothing but what? Inverted repeats. Inverted repeat sequence. So due to the availability of inverted repeat sequence, here there is a chance for the formation of what? Hairpin loop structure, right? So here in case of the eukaryotic mRNA, there is an availability of some specialized nucleotide sequence and it is nothing but inverted repeat. Due to the presence of inverted repeat, here the specific hairpin loop structure, it was formed here. So here, after the successful formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex, now the 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit to the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA. But here, the specific 43S pre-initiation complex, it is unable to recognize the specialized modification which is present at the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA. So if we consider in case of the eukaryotes, after the successful synthesis of the eukaryotic mRNA, when the specific mRNA, when it is ready to export from the nucleus to the cytoplasm for participating in the translation mechanism. So prior to the exporting of the specific eukaryotic mRNA from the nucleus to the cytoplasm for participating in the translation mechanism, the specific eukaryotic mRNA, it undergoes some specialized modifications. And these specialized modifications, they are nothing but what? Post-transcriptional modifications, right? So what are post-transcriptional modifications here? The post-transcriptional modifications, they are nothing but 5' capping and 3' tailing, right? So let me write it here. Post-transcriptional modifications. Post-transcriptional modifications. And these include 5' capping and 3' tailing. So let me write it here. 5' capping and the other one is 3' tailing. Now here my question is, what is 5' capping here? In case of the 5' capping, exactly one specialized methylated guanosine nucleotide, it gets successfully recruited at the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, right? In case of the 5' capping, one specialized methylated guanosine nucleotide, and it is nothing but what? 7-methylated guanosine nucleotide. It gets successfully recruited at the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA. And now the specific 43S pre-initiation complex itself, it is unable to recognize the methylated guanosine nucleotide which was recruited to the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA. So under such condition, to overcome the problem or to eradicate the problem, the translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of a specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. What it is? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. So what is eukaryotic initiation factor 4F here? It is a trimeric protein complex. The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 4F, it is a trimeric protein complex. That means it possesses 3 different subunits here. So what are those? One include eukaryotic initiation factor 4A, eukaryotic initiation factor 4A, eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, and the other one is eukaryotic initiation factor 4G. So these are the three specialized subunits which are a part of the eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. So here, in order to recognize the 7-methylated guanosine nucleotide which is present at the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, in order to recognize the 7-methylated guanosine nucleotide which is present at the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, the translation mechanism or the 43S pre-initiation complex, it takes the advantage of a specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. Under eukaryotic initiation factor 4F, there is an availability of a specialized subfactor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4E. So what is eukaryotic initiation factor 4E here? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, it is nothing but it is a cap binding protein. So let me write it here. Eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, it is a cap binding protein. It is a cap binding protein. Cap binding protein. The specific protein which is responsible for recognizing the methylated guanosine nucleotide, it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4E. And what about eukaryotic initiation factor 4A? It is an RNA helicase activity protein. RNA helicase activity protein factor, right? So what is the requirement of RNA helicase activity here? As I have already told you, due to the presence of the inverted repeats, in case of the eukaryotic mRNA, here there is a chance for the formation of hairpin loop structure. In order to cleave the hairpin loop structure, because in the presence of hairpin loop structure, the small subunit of the ribosome, it is unable to proceed in 5' to 3' direction. So in order to overcome the problem, the translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of a specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4A. So what is eukaryotic initiation factor 4A here? It is an RNA helicase activity factor. So by taking the advantage of eukaryotic initiation factor 4A, the hairpin loop structure which was formed here, it gets successfully degraded, right? So that is the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 4A. Then what about eukaryotic initiation factor 4G here? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 4G, it is the specific factor which is responsible for binding the multiple adenosine nucleotides which are present at the 3' end of the eukaryotic mRNA. In what way? At the extreme 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, there is an availability of 7-methylated guanosine nucleotide. In the same way, at the extreme 3' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, there is an availability of multiple adenosine nucleotides. So in order to recognize the multiple adenosine nucleotides which are present at the extreme 3' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, the translation mechanism or the eukaryotic translation mechanism, it takes the advantage of a specialized initiation factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4G. So let me write it here. It is a poly A binding protein. It is a poly A binding protein. Poly A binding protein, right? So that is the role of these three individual factors which are a part of the eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. So by taking the advantage of eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, the 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit at the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA, right? So let me arrange the things here. 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recruit at the 5' end of the eukaryotic mRNA by taking the advantage of eukaryotic initiation factor 4E. Eukaryotic initiation factor 4E. So let me write it here. So this is the small subunit of the ribosome, right? Which possess three specialized sites like A site, P site and E site, right? Here at the very beginning, eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it was recruited here, right? Then after eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, it was recruited here, right? Then after the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it is capable to recruit the initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid, right? Initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid. So after the successful recruitment of the eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it remains in GDP conformation. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2, it remains in GDP conformation, right? And the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, as I have already mentioned you, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GDP, it has lesser affinity to recruit to the P site of the ribosome, right? So then after eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, right? Eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it gets successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome. And the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b and the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it is very responsible for the successful dissociation of the initiation factors which were recruited to the three respective sites, right? The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, it is very homologous to the initiation factor 2 of the prokaryotic translation mechanism. So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5b, when it was successfully recruited to the P site of the ribosome, now the small subunit of the ribosome, it is capable to proceed in 5' to 3' direction, right? 5' to 3' direction. 5' to 3' direction until it recognizes the start codon or the initiation codon, right? As we have already discussed during the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of the prokaryotes, the small subunit of the ribosome, once when it was got successfully recruited to the mRNA, the small subunit of the ribosome, it proceeds successfully in 5' to 3' direction until it recognizes the start codon or the initiation codon by taking the advantage of a mechanism or a specific process which is nothing but what? Scanning. What it is? Scanning. So let me write it here. What is scanning here? Scanning is the mechanism or it is the process through which the small subunit of the eukaryotic ribosome, it is capable to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon. But here we need to understand one key point here. What it is? In case of the prokaryotic mRNA, the start codon or the initiation codon, it is available like a normal sense codon, right? But whereas in case of the eukaryotic translation mechanism, the scenario is quite opposite. In case of the eukaryotic translation mechanism or the eukaryotic translation process, the start codon or the initiation codon, it is not available in a free form. The specific start codon or the initiation codon, it is embedded within a specialized sequence, and that specialized sequence, it is nothing but what? Kozak sequence. What it is? Kozak sequence. So let me write it here. What it is? Kozak sequence. So what is Kozak sequence here? It is a polypurine sequence. It is a polypurine sequence. So within the Kozak sequence, the start codon which is nothing but AUG is embedded here, right? So by taking the advantage of Kozak sequence, which is a polypurine sequence, the 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon, which is nothing but AUG, most common in case of the eukaryotes. But here we need to understand one key point here. The 43S pre-initiation complex, when it proceeds in 5' to 3' direction, in order to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon, the 43S pre-initiation complex itself, it is unable to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon. In order to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon, so let me present it here. In order to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon, the translation mechanism or the translation process, it takes the advantage of one more other specialized factor, and it is nothing but what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 4b. Eukaryotic initiation factor 4b. So by taking the advantage of eukaryotic initiation factor 4b, the 43S pre-initiation complex, it is capable to recognize the start codon or the initiation codon. Now the start codon or the initiation codon, it was placed exactly at the P site of the ribosome, right? Now the specific start codon or the initiation codon, it is placed exactly at the P site of the ribosome. Now the specific start codon or the initiation codon, it gets interacted with the initiated tRNA which is containing its encoding amino acid. So once when the specific start codon or the initiation codon, when it is placed exactly or accurately at the P site of the ribosome, then after the specific initiated tRNA with its encoding amino acid, it interacts with the start codon or the initiation codon. Then after what exactly happens here? After the successful recognition of the start codon or the initiation codon, then in the very next step, a specialized factor known as what? Eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GDP, it gets successfully dissociated, right? So let me present it here. Eukaryotic initiation factor 2, in the very next step, after the successful recognition of the start codon or the initiation codon, in the very next step, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which has lesser affinity, because as I have already told you, eukaryotic initiation factor 2, when it is in association with GTP, it has higher affinity to recruit to the P site of the ribosome. But the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, when it is in association with the GDP moiety, it has lesser affinity to recruit to the P site of the ribosome. Now the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GDP, it gets successfully dissociated here, right? Eukaryotic initiation factor 2, which is in association with GDP, it was got successfully dissociated here, right? So after the successful dissociation of the eukaryotic initiation factor 2, then after one more other factor known as eukaryotic initiation factor 3. Eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it gets successfully dissociated from the E site of the ribosome. Eukaryotic initiation factor 3. So let me present it here again. So after the successful dissociation of the eukaryotic initiation factor 3 from the E site of the ribosome, then after what exactly happens here? As I have already told you, the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 3, it acts as a gatekeeper. In the presence of eukaryotic initiation factor 3, the large subunit of the ribosome, it is unable to associate with the small subunit, right? So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, when it was got successfully dissociated, or once when it was got successfully discarded from the E site of the ribosome, within no time, now the large subunit of the ribosome comes into the picture, right? So let me present it here. So let us assume it as the small subunit of the eukaryotic ribosome with its respect to three sites, A site, P site and E site, right? So here there is an availability of eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, and here the eukaryotic initiation factor 3, which was got successfully recruited to the E site of the ribosome. The specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, which was got successfully recruited to the E site of the ribosome, it was discarded here, right? So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 3, when it was got successfully dissociated from the E site of the ribosome, under such condition, now the large subunit of the ribosome, it comes into the picture. Now the large subunit of the ribosome, it comes into the picture. So once when the large subunit of the ribosome, when it was got successfully associated with the small subunit of the ribosome, now it leads to the formation of a specialized complex, and that specialized complex, it is nothing but what? ATS pre-initiation complex. ATS pre-initiation complex. ATS pre-initiation complex. So then after once when the specific ATS pre-initiation complex, when it was formed, then after one more other factor known as eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. So I am very sorry to say it is not eukaryotic initiation factor 4F, it is eukaryotic initiation factor 5B. Eukaryotic initiation factor 5B, it comes into the picture and it gets successfully dissociated. From the P site of the ribosome. As I have already told you, the role of eukaryotic initiation factor 5B. Eukaryotic initiation factor 5B, it is very homologous to the eukaryotic initiation factor 2 of prokaryotes, right? So once when the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 5B, when it was got successfully dissociated from the P site of the ribosome, then after in the last step of the initiation phase of the translation mechanism, eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, which was recruited to the A site of the ribosome, it gets successfully dissociated, right? So once when the eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, the specific eukaryotic initiation factor 1A, which was recruited to the A site of the ribosome, when it was got successfully dissociated, then after, now the specific initiation phase of the translation mechanism, it gets successfully proceeded into elongation phase of the translation mechanism, right? So formation of ATS pre-initiation complex, it indirectly suggests, or it indirectly says that the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, it was successfully organized, right? So this is about the initiation phase of the translation mechanism in case of eukaryotes, right? So I hope that this video will help you a lot. So if you like this video, just hit the like button and share it to your friends. And I remember you people, to subscribe my channel for getting more and more videos what I make day to day. Thank you.